Hey everybody, welcome to Get to Know Your Wedding Pro. My name is Reed with Best Made Videos. We are a wedding videography company based out of West Seattle, Washington. And I'm so excited to be joined today by Danielle Nichole, based out of Portland. She's a wedding planner extraordinaire. We've been talking off microphone before, just kind of how everything's going and getting into this season now. Danielle, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us who you are and what you do.
Yes. Hi, everybody. My name's Danielle. I'm from Events by Danielle Nichole, a wedding coordinator out of Portland. And I kind of do a little bit of everything, not just wedding coordinating. I help my couples with photography needs. If they need, anything, I can do it for them. Hair, makeup, floral arrangements, pretty much you name it. I do it. Crafts. I actually went into crafting and I can make invites and I can do signs. And I can also make special, because of COVID, special social distancing wedding COVID signs now. So that's kind of a little bit about me and little things that I do. But besides that, I am married and I do have a 2-year-old who is my little assistant. So yeah.
That's great. Yeah. And you certainly check a lot of boxes having, you're married, you've done, photography and things on the other side, right? So I certainly think you really have a well-rounded, view. Sometimes you're like, we're working with planners and it'll be like, hey, we need to go. And they don't understand, so it's good to have a planner that's been on the other side and kind of knows like, well, we actually kind of got to get that shot right now, right? We don't, the sun's going to go away. So how did you get involved in weddings and all this? I mean, it's been, over a decade now of your life. Talk to me. How did we get going?
So weddings kind of just happened. How it all began was I was the go-to person for planning events in my family at the age of 15. So every time a family gathering would happen, it was just kind of like I was the organized one and everyone would be like, oh, Danielle, what should we do for timeline? Or what type of food should we serve? Or how should the flow go? And I'm like, okay, I got it. I did everything behind the scenes. And then from there, it kind of, from family friends, they were like, we have people getting married. Do you want to do like wedding planning? So I kind of just stepped into it. And then when I got married, my husband was a photographer. And so I switched gears from like being the family friend of doing like events to, oh, I'm going to work with my husband. I'm going to do photography with him. And his photography focus is more commercial. And then from commercial, we went to wedding and then we went back to commercial, but then back to wedding. But after learning that side a little bit more, that's when going to weddings and going to commercial shoots, I was like, okay, I would step in and I'd be like, all right, I'm gonna help you with this time. I'm going to help with the flow. I'm going to make sure the DJ has his cue. I'm going to make sure the videographer knows what's going on. We're just going to make sure everything's good. And then that's when my husband's like, okay, you should get back into planning events and things because you're really good at it. Not that you're not great at photography, you have a great eye, but you're always distracted and you get pulled aside. And I'm like, yeah. So now I'm into, weddings and helping out with that. And then from weddings, just recently just got into more corporate events. So with focusing on helping with live streaming of corporate trainings and things like that. So it's been kind of a weird adventure how I got to where I am now.
Yeah, it's interesting when you have couples, where everyone focuses on, the weddings, it is like you live and breathe kind of all sides of it, we're like, my wife's a teacher. And so it's kind of, we have that, but where you guys, it's, everything, right. Where you're, always trying something new and where you're both kind of entrepreneurs. It's got to be exciting to kind of, constantly be trying to find like the new adventure to tackle.
Yeah, it is. And it's kind of funny because my husband, even though he is a photographer, does work still in the event and wedding industry for a rental company in Portland for marketing. And so it's like we don't escape it and it's always a part of us. So and whenever I plan something, I always tell him and he's like, oh yeah, let's do it this way. Let's try it that way. And it's great because he gets it. And if one of us is kind of like tired or, get that moment of like, okay, we're exhausted, the other one's just like, I get you, I feel you. Do you have a long wedding today? What happened? And the conversation's easy for us to talk about it. But a lot of our friends are just kind of like, what do you guys talk? What? Like, whoa, you guys actually like sit and talk about work together and understand everything? We're like, we work in the industry. So
Well, yeah, it seems like you guys are busy, energetic. Where does that energy come from? Where do you guys, I mean, just serial entrepreneurs just always trying to kind of find the new, you know?
I would have to say having a toddler gave us a lot of energy and a lot of drive. Also, my husband, he is very spoken with liking to do he really likes to like go forward with the entrepreneurial state of things. So he's always like gets inspiration from things, and then it kind of feeds off of my energy. He's just like, oh my God, let's do this. And I get excited because every time it has to deal with planning, and I'm like, yes. But then when we have a toddler, it also helps with our energy levels too, because I don't ever want her to see me tired. So I'm like, okay, we're going to liven it up. We're going to do this and everything like that. So that's kind of where energy drive comes from. And also with all of his new things that he's doing as well. And all the new things that he always tells me, he's like the inspiration person. He feeds me the inspiration. I go, let's do it. I'm totally down. And I owe it all to really where he works too, since he gets to see all the new stuff for weddings and everything. And, you know, being a planner, I want to know what's the new chair style? What's the new tablecloth? What can we do with this? What can we do with that? Oh, what's the new trend now? I saw unicorn colored, you know, utensils. Like, what's going on with that? That's really hot in the East Coast. This is what's hot in Europe. And he's like, yeah, and we have it all. Do you want to play with it? So
That's awesome. Are you guys, did you grow up in Portland? Are you from the area?
So I originally am from Columbus, Georgia, in the South. I moved up here when I was like 8, and then I kept going back and forth. So I'm not originally from Portland. Originally from the South. So I tell people I still carry a Florida's driver's license because that's like where all my family is, because I travel back and forth so much. And we do weddings in both here and in Florida. So I'm like, yeah, I live there and I live here. When it's really cold and dreary here, then I am in Florida. When it is super, super hot and muggy, I'm in Oregon. So it's kind of how it works. But I've been here pretty much close to like 20 years or so now in Portland. So I guess I could say I'm technically like from Portland. I've lived here for that long.
What brought you out to the West Coast?
Huh?
What brought you out to
Oh,
the West Coast?
for the West Coast, my mom moved out here when I was younger. So having my parents are divorced, so my mom was like, I'm gonna move to Oregon with your stepdad, and then once I check it out, you're coming with me. And that's kind of what happened. And then I kind of just stayed here, either way. So it was kind of like a no-brainer. And also I've been thinking about moving permanently back to the South, but then after like spending time there in humid weather and then like having gorgeous summers up in the West, I was like, no, let's enjoy the Pacific Northwest a little bit longer. Yes, it gets rainy and gloomy in the winter, but it's better than humid and one season the whole year. And now that we have a child, I'm like, I'd like her to see, fall, winter, spring, summer, not just spring and summer.
Well, you kind of get the best of both worlds and going back and forth between the coasts.
Yeah, definitely.
And we were talking before we recorded, you guys do, destination weddings and, in Portland, and like you were saying before that, do you notice a big shift between them, or do you have, similar client mindset no matter where, the wedding takes place? I mean, how does that work kind of ping ponging around like that?
Yeah. So with destination weddings, you definitely notice there's definitely a difference between destination and local weddings that I've noticed. Our destination weddings, our clients are very adventurous and they're willing to try anything as long as they get to the location they're at and we make it work. But they're very adventurous. They're like, we want to do this. And they're very flexible here and there. Where my local weddings, the brides just kind of want to stay local. They are a little bit adventurous. Like if I go, hey, there's like a really cool waterfall, like why don't you go take pictures there? Or here's a really cool spot. So that way we can like make the arrangements. Cause I try to think of photographers when I'm working with my couples, especially with planning. And when they tell me their venue, I try to make it work so that way the photographers can get really cool shots and the couples can get, time away and be alone. But sometimes they're kind of like, no, we like the venue. We want to stay at the venue. So it makes it a little bit challenging. Whereas when we do destination weddings, I can work with a couple and I could be like, hey, you're getting married, for example, we'll say Fiji. You're getting married in Fiji. This is amazing, beautiful space. We have the ceremony all planned out. But as we need time and your guests and everything, why do we not have your guests go and enjoy the, waterfall down by the beach a little bit with some drinks, and you guys can go take some exotic photos and where the waterfall is, and you guys have a moment alone with the photographer, take some really cool pictures while I'm over here. And it allows for a little bit more spread. Whereas here, especially, sometimes they want to be close to everything. So that's kind of what we've noticed with like the mindset when it comes to destination and then when it comes to local. But either way, still get cool, amazing weddings out of it. And especially here locally, sometimes you can't really predict the weather, thunderstorm and hail, even in the middle of summer, and then it will be like beautiful sunshine. So, yeah.
What kinds of couples do you find are inspired to work with you and that you like working with them? Because it is a two-way street when it comes to with the vendors and the clients.
Yeah. So type of couples, I would have to say it's really the type of couples looking for a creative side. Someone that can handle the creative realms of setting up decor, helping them with the timeline, helping them figure out how to get their vision put on from paper out to their wedding. And that's what I usually help them with. And so I usually see that with my clients that book me, it's more those clients that are kind of like, here's my vision and I know you can do it. They're like, you were able to bring a llama into this venue, so I know you can do my vision. And I'm like, because I'm the type of person where I'm like, I don't take no for an answer. So we're going to try and make it happen. I have one couple who wants an elephant. I'm like, I may not be able to get you an elephant here, but I can bring you to an elephant. Like, we can make that arrangement. So that's kind of usually the minds of couples that come to me, is the ones that are looking for that wedding planner who's going to be like, they're going to try every single possible thing to make it happen, no matter what. And I'm like, that's me. And then making sure their vision is kind of like captured. People will hand me things they've drawn out. Like, here's my bouquet. I drew this out. This is what I want. And I've been able to find the right floral vendor for them and be like, this is what we're looking at. I hand it to them and they're like, yeah, I can create that. I'm like, perfect. Let's do it. So.
Do you try to, as a planner, do you try to assemble a team that you think is going to work for the client? Because I know that sometimes some of the planners we work with are a little more, just doing the coordination stuff. I mean, do you feel like you try to really build that team for them?
Yeah, I try to make sure that even if they book vendors before they book me, or if I'm helping with booking of vendors, that either way, no matter what, all of the vendors can coincide together. We share the same vision, and communication is very key for me with that when that happens. So most of the time they'll book all their main vendors before they book me. And I just quickly send an email out to all the vendors and I just go, hey, do you guys have time? Let's talk. If you have time to jump on a video call, we have our own little video conference call, and let's talk about so-and-so's wedding. Let's see where everybody's at. Let's work together on our timelines to know arrivals. So that way not everybody arrives at the same time and we have to fight for the loading dock and things like that. And so that's one thing that other vendors I've worked with are just amazed, because they're usually it's just chaos, but you make sure it's a flow. And I create timelines per each vendor off of a main timeline. So then that way they have the full day, but then I highlight in there, here's your focus areas for the timelines and stuff. That's been helpful with making sure that everyone works smoothly. And then when I'm creating, the team, if the couples are we haven't booked anybody else, we would like your help, then that's where I make sure that the couple and the vendors match. It's not so much I'm not too worried on my end on who I work with. I just worry on how well do they match with the couple. So I usually will send the couple not too many options. I do like up to 4 or 5. And I go, here's like 5 from each department that I've done the research for. Excuse me, let's see who you fit with the most. And they usually are like, but what about you? And you working with, like, I can work with anybody. We got something down. We talk, we communicate. I can work with anybody. I just want to make sure that you can work with this vendor. If you can't work for this vendor, then we won't work with them. I don't want to force you to work with someone that you cannot work with. So when I'm building the team, it's all about how do they work well with with the client? Can they communicate with each other if they choose to, sometimes my couples, they like to be a part of the communication. Can they communicate? Do they get it off well? And so a lot of my couples have been very grateful with that. They're like, you have been able to match us with perfect vendors. I'm like, that's awesome. So
when for transitioning, from, the photography, to the planning, did you have like because obviously you probably worked with a lot of other, coordinators and planners. Like, did you have a vision for, the experience that you wanted your clients to have and your couples to have? Like, how did you want, your service to stand apart? Because obviously you had probably had experience.
So for me, my vision was really to make it couple led. I know when starting it off, it was about finding the rhythm on how do I communicate with my couples without overwhelming them. And so for me, my vision was making sure that my couples had complete control over that communication standpoint, because I can over communicate. I know, like, vendor to vendor, it's good when we over communicate to one another, but then to the couple, they can just be very overwhelmed by that because they have so much things going on, especially with current events happening right now. And so for me, when I switched and went back to coordination and planning, it was more, I want to make sure my couples know that I'm a phone call, an email, text message, Facebook message, however they want to communicate, I'm there for them, and that they know that they can communicate with me unlimited. And that was the number one rule, because I know there's some planners where they're like, oh, we can only talk this time or this time, or, limit and everything like that. But for me, it was right off the bat, I tell them, once you, book me, you have me until 3 weeks after the wedding and you're still on your honeymoon. And they're like, what? I'm like, yes. And you can call me anytime. And they're like, so I can call you at 3 a.m. freaking out. I'm like, yes. Like, I want you to call me if you need to call me, like leaving up that open line of communication. And I think that's what's made my experience and also my business kind of successful with couples here in Portland and outside of Portland, is that open communication in that area where they can contact me whenever, and also showing them that it's not just me and like a group of others, it's me and a group of others that you can contact. So the grooms, they can contact my husband, or, brides, if they feel comfortable talking to my husband, they can contact my husband and talk to him, and they know that he's available whenever. If they need special help or assistance with like wedding license things, they know that there's other members of my team that they can reach out to, and things like that. So just leaving that communication open, and then them understanding that it's not only just myself. If you're comfortable talking to someone else because they know more about something, by all means, you can contact them too. They know to keep their lines available and everything. And also for them to understand that, once you work with me, and it goes with vendors, I tell them, once you work with me, you're under the family tree. So a lot of my brides, another thing was that brides saw the other video was me with that family tree, was them also, helping them with anything else they needed. And since I became a parent, I also help them with parenting needs, because the fun fact is, literally within 5 years, if you're married within 5 years after working with myself or my husband, doesn't matter, planning or photography, you end up having a baby. I don't know. It's kind of crazy. It's happened. Every single couple, we get baby shower invites, and I'm like, whoa, what? And it's like a year, like usually a year later, or like within the 5 years, they either have a baby, adoption gets approved, something, and they're like, you have to start our family now, you can help me with this. So that was the other thing that
That's awesome. And then where you do the other events and stuff too, that's great. Cause then you just crow, oh, we do baby showers. We could do,
Yeah,
the birthdays. And
kind of what happens too. And it's just kind of, and like we become like the, family photographer. My husband becomes family photographer. He's done one family, he's done all the cousins' weddings and siblings' weddings, and then all of their kids' portraits and all of the family
I'm sure he loves it. He says, keep doing this, keep planning.
So he's like, this happens. I'm like, well, it falls under the umbrella of family. Like, we still keep in touch with all of our couples. We may not announce, like, out of privacy. We don't always announce their, like, hey, happy anniversary to so and so. It's just out of privacy. We want to be respectful for them unless they're like, we're totally cool with that. But we're always there. That we're Facebook friends. We invite them to family gatherings whenever they want to come over. We go, hey, you're more than welcome to come. So
No, it's so funny. And then we've talked before on the podcast with people where I do think that couples don't always realize how important sometimes, because we, especially as like, the planners and stuff, but you spend, so much time like thinking about the couples, working towards the wedding day. And I do think that like, sometimes I feel like I remember a lot of my couples a lot more than me. They always remember me, because you do spend, so much time. But to shameless plug, like you were saying with, to shamelessly plug my own, I think it was yesterday or the day before I had messaged one of our brides. Like probably a terrible video, right? Just like way a long time ago when I was getting started that, but I still email everybody every year. And she's, oh yeah, my husband is stationed in like Australia now. Like, we have 2 kids. We showed them the video, like last night. I'm like, this is incredible, but it's like, as we get connected to them and like you said, getting to see them over the years, it is cool to really feel that impact that you have, with so many different people.
yeah, and it's definitely one of those things that I tell all vendors that ask me, like, that are starting out, like, what's the one thing like that I should make sure I incorporate in my business? And I tell them, I'm like, you have to also think about your couples. And I tell them it sounds odd, but you're going to spend so much time with them that they're almost like, extended family. And so when, if there's family drama or anything going on, like, you're going to know about it. So like, you kind of know about everything happening. So you got to think of them as family and just, keep in contact with them. Don't be shy. Like, some people are like, oh, you don't want to friend your couples on Facebook. And I'm like, honestly, I don't mind friending my couples on Facebook. Like, there was one couple when I was having my daughter about 2 years ago. I was in the hospital and she's like friends with me on Facebook and Instagram. And she didn't realize, I sent a message to everyone like, hey, I'm going to be going into labor pretty soon, but don't worry. Everyone's here to talk. I will need people to talk to. She saw me working on a timeline because my husband posted it up on Instagram while I'm like in the bed, hooked up to machines, labor. And she like called me. She's like, "Oh my god, are you okay? Oh my god, is baby okay? Oh my god, I'm sending you flowers. Oh my god, I feel so bad." I'm like, "No, actually, it's calming me down. You're fine." And but I told them, I'm like, "See, that they think of you as family too." And that was like my example of telling people starting out is like, think of them as family. They're gonna think of you as family. If they want to add you on Facebook, that's the way of them saying like, "You're my family now. Like, you're my best friend through this whole thing." So
It's no, that's so funny. Yeah, because I'll post a bunch of like dumb stuff like on Instagram, just like everything's going on. It's so terrible in the world, but just trying to like whatever. And because I'll get brides that'll say, "Oh, it's like I look forward to that every morning." Your dumb little stuff you post or whatever. And finally, my wife was on a Zoom call yesterday with a couple of her friends, and one of them, I walked by and she's like, "Hey, tell Reed, like, I really appreciate like that." And I was like, okay, see, now you get why I do it. Cause she doesn't get it when it's like all the brides and grooms and everybody else. But now it's like, oh, well, if my friend thinks it's funny, then it must be.
yeah, and it just creates that more personal thing. And that's where it goes back to my vision of making sure that the vendors can work with the client and the client can work with the vendors. Make sure they can communicate really well with each other. So
I want to hear about your wedding as someone that's lived in the wedding industry, and I'm sure there's an interesting story there. So I want to hear about that.
my wedding, a lot of so being a wedding planner, everyone thinks like, oh my gosh, you probably have the biggest wedding ever. And It was grand and spectacular. And honestly, it was a very small wedding with a 007 theme. I made sure my husband looked like James Bond, and I wore a red jumpsuit so I can look like a Bond's girl. I also had mermaid hair. I had like little streaks of color in my hair because I was like, well, Bond's girls, they have to be under disguise sometimes. So I need to do something crazy with my hair. And so it was a very small, intimate wedding. For our ceremony, we had it at the waterfront in Portland, East Bank, with just our parents and my siblings and his siblings. Uh, and like my uncle, we just were at the East Bank waterfront. We had a very small ceremony. It was on the hottest day of June, like super hot. And our best friend, who was an officiant, just like married us. He was like, well, what do you guys want? And I was like, just a 5-minute short, simple ceremony. Just basically skip everything and just go, do you and do you. And we say yes. And then you can say a little blurb, but like pretty much you can bless our rings, whatever you want to do. And that's it. And he's like, why? And I'm like, because I don't even think we can do this in Portland. I don't even know. That was, he's like, you're a wedding planner. How do you not know if you can have like, I was like, honestly, I don't know. I've never had to deal with this before, but we wanted to do it. So we just did it. And then after that, we went to a really awesome venue um, in Portland called Opal 28. And we just did like casual. I still made everyone dress up. I was like, hey, it's 007 theme, black tie. Think of it like you're going, on a secret mission or something. You can wear your gown, you can wear your favorite suit, your favorite tux. I don't care, but it's black tie. And all our friends came dressed to the nines, and we had just basically like happy hour at this venue, like happy hour hors d'oeuvre type foods, and then like all you can drink and everything. It was just kind of laid back. And they're like, for the theme, you really made the reception really laid back, Danielle. And I was like, well, yeah, it's supposed to be like, you're undercover.
Why 007?
Um, we went 007, or because my husband, every time he watches 007 or that other movie, The Kingsman, he loves the suits. And it was just like that tailored like suit or that tailored tuxedo look. And he was just like, I love that. And so that was kind of what drew kind of the inspiration from it. And then also, I'm not really traditional in that I didn't want to wear a wedding gown. My parents bought me one that I picked out, beautiful gown, but I was just like, I really don't want to wear it. And I was like, Bonds girls. I was thinking like, what would they
Yeah, they
wear?
wouldn't wear a white dress. No.
They wouldn't wear that. Like, I was like, they're gonna wear a red jumpsuit or something, just like, whoa. And so I just wore the red jumpsuit, but then also my husband's Vietnamese, and so red was like a lucky color and everything. So it was like perfect that we're combining everything together. You love the suit, the atmosphere of like the 007. And it was kind of like we were on a mission when we were at East Bank getting married. Like, thankfully we got married there's like a little there's like a fire station there. And we knew the firefighters that work at the fire station. So we got married closer to the fire station, and they were just like, yeah, woo.
Yeah, don't call the cops.
So that way, if there was any issues, they could be like, it's all right, they're fine. um, but that was kind of like the whole thing with 007. But we do plan on having something bigger and extravagant a little bit later. Now that we have a daughter, like my husband's like, it'd be cute if she's the flower girl. And so I was like, for our bigger extravagant wedding, after doing so many destination weddings, I'm like, I want that Disney wedding. Like, we always do Disney weddings, and I want one now. And he's like, you want to get married again? I'm like, yes, I want that. I want to go through it again, but I want to do like the whole stress. Because first time I didn't have any stress because we were just like, all right, let's do it. We're going to do this. And then we're going to do this. And then it was like small amount of people. I was like, no, now I want the stress. I want to have like everybody we know there. And he's like, okay. So.
Do you find, and you could have felt as emotionally connected before you got married, but do you feel like having gone through that process, you feel, I know that for me getting married, I was a wedding vendor, but I feel much more connected now emotionally than I did prior to kind of going through that, just with the guys, and like the nerves and like everything else. Like I didn't really kind of think of it the same way I do now. Do you feel, and maybe you felt before and I was just kind of a dummy, but do you feel more connected now?
I feel a little bit more connected. Before, when doing weddings, I didn't really have like that emotion when the bride walks down. I'm just like, awesome, I got them down the aisle. But now, like after we got married, and that was like 5 years ago. Yeah. Um, After we got married, then I got that emotion and then walking down the aisle, I'm sitting there like with my tissues crying, and I'm not only am I like, yes, I got them down, I'm like, oh my god, she's so beautiful. Oh my god, I remember that. Oh my god, this, and then I go, oh, I want this for you know, but and also like when it comes to the whole me is like food. I get really emotional with the food. So when they like start planning on their food and desserts, because that's a big thing for me. Like before, I'm just like, oh, it's just wedding food. So like, whatever. Like now I'm like, no, we need to make sure that it tastes really, really good. And we need to make sure that everyone enjoys it. After having really good food at my wedding, everyone should have really good food at their wedding. So that's another thing that I get tied to is like food and desserts. And when I was pregnant, it was bad. I like would sneak desserts and eat them. And everyone would be looking, I'm like, baby wants a macaron. Leave me alone.
I've never heard of that. Yeah, I've never heard a wedding planner be such an advocate for quality catering, but that's good. That's good.
Well, I like to make sure. And I also am an advocate for when a caterer starts to say, like, oh, vendors should get vendor. I go, no, 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 no. We eat whatever everyone else eats. Like, no, you're not giving us a bag lunch. I had a very expensive hotel in Seattle, Washington, give all the vendors club sandwiches. And I was like, no. And so I made friends with the chef, with the photographer, and I made friends with the chef, and they cooked us like like a 5-star meal. I was like, thank you. So
It's yeah, I we yeah, the Seattle hotels are always interesting. I always will remember we used to do this charity auction, and we auctioned off like a video, and so we got booked. Like we probably would never have gotten booked for this. Like we're not like super like the highest end videographers, right? I mean, we try to do a good job, but like this was the Four Seasons and like top planner, top photographer, top DJ, like all this stuff. And it was the same thing. They wouldn't feed us. It was supposed to be like steak or whatever for everyone else. They were trying to make us sandwiches, but they couldn't stop like making the steaks to do the sandwich, to do whatever. And I remember finally I went in and got like this big bowl of Fritos that had been out in like the groom's getting ready room or whatever.
mhm.
And people are just ravenous. It's like 10 o'clock at night. And I just can't remember sitting there thinking like, these are like the top like 8, wedding vendors like in Seattle here, like eating out of this stupid bowl of chips because no one will feed us, and it's just crazy.
Yeah,
So yeah, I definitely, yes, catering, take care of the vendors.
that is my big thing. Like when I tell my couples, I'm like, we are feeding everybody. Everybody that's working your wedding, all the guests, we are feeding them. And they're like, yes, I don't want my vendors. I'm like, they're always asking me, like, what's the one thing that vendors like would get like kind of about for weddings? I was like, food. And I was like, you got to make sure you feed them. And they're like, okay. So every time when that food talk comes around, I'm like, we got to make sure it's good food, make sure everybody can enjoy themselves, and then make sure that when we give the final count, it includes all the vendors that are staying to work your wedding. And then I'm the one that always makes the plates for all the vendors too. Like it's the mom in me. Like I'm like, you need to eat, DJ. Like, what do you like? Here's the menu. And I give the menu to all my vendors beforehand. And I say, here's the menu, and I take their order. So that way, if you're busy working and I see you're busy working, I will make sure to put food aside for you. And I'll let you know, like, hey, the food's over there for you. When you're ready, just grab your plate and the silverware's all there. Just grab your plate and everything. Go up to the bar, let them know. A beer or wine, if you like to have one of those during the wedding, it's comped for you at the bar already waiting for you. And they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, I got you. Don't worry about it. Like if you need to do that. And then I usually tell them later because the groomsmen are like, hey, we're going to do shots. I want all the vendors to do a shot with us later. We're the bride and couple. I'm like, all right, I'll let them know too. But I tell them, out of respect, some of them may not do it. Make sure you got like a juice or something there. And and whatnot. And my couples are like, you took care of our vendors are raving about you, you took care of us. I'm like, that's what I do.
It's so funny, yeah, because and not to segue this whole thing into food, but it is funny that like, like getting ready stuff, like if you're at the hotel, there couldn't be enough food. Like 1,800 sandwiches, we got all, like you go wherever people are getting ready, pile of drinks, pile of soda, pile of chips, and then yeah, then it's like the 8 hours later when you need to eat, and it's like, oh, we have no food. There's no food anywhere, and you're like, what happened to all this? you know.
Yeah.
I want to know what was the biggest change from not being well, and I mean, you kind of ping pong back and forth, like you said, with planning and not, but going into the planning full time and really being on that side of it. What was the biggest like change or something that surprised you from like doing the photography, or did you just ping pong so much that it wasn't like you kind of felt like you were aware?
I would say the biggest change was kind of workload was the biggest change. So photography I felt was more stressful on my end because with photography and any other type of thing like videography and like DJing and all of that, you got to make sure you kind of follow timeline. But then if you have a shot list, you got to really kind of make sure you get all the shots and everything like that. And so the workload was just very different. Photography, it was very much like, okay, I have to make sure that I get this and get this, and then having to communicate, with their coordinator or whomever to make sure that you have enough time for that. Whereas now, as me as the planner, workload is still kind of the same, but is shifted to like now that I understand, like I know the photographer and videographer, they're going to need X amount of time for this. I feel like I can almost help other vendors and making sure that they have plenty of time. And then, with all the knowledge that I've gained, like it's kind of made it smoother in a way, made it smoother. And I feel like it made the whole experience for all other vendors smoother too. So then they're not as much panicking about, well, I got to make sure I have this, or I have to have enough time to make sure everyone dances, or we capture all of this and all of that. Where now I'm like, I know that. I'm the wedding planner. I got it. This is good.
What's
Every time I create that timeline, they look at it and they're like, you gave me like way too much time. And I'm like, I'd rather give way too much time than too little time. And they're like, that's true. Because you never know at weddings. It could either run super fast or we could be super behind. So,
That's funny. What's your favorite part of the wedding day as someone to work and having experienced it and going through it to be to be there with your clients?
so my favorite part is any type of first look, whether it's a first look with the groom or if they're doing like first look with parents or, any type of first look, depending on how they're doing that. That's one of my most favorite parts because it just kind of makes that like magical, surreal moment. Like, oh my gosh, they get to see everything. And then another favorite part is when a couple like first enter in like the ceremony and they see everything set up or see everything with the reception, and they like first enter in and you see their smile. That's all you see is this big smile and then them having a good time. Same with like the ceremony. You see even though they have little tears because they're excited and everything, you still see that smile. They're like, yeah, it makes you feel really good inside. So those are like my two most favorite moments. And it makes me feel really good inside. And I just go, I did my job. I did what they wanted me to do. They're really happy. All my vendors are happy. So when I see smiles on everyone's faces and I see everyone like excited and happy, and I see a photographer with their second shooter like clicking away, having things to photograph, I'm like, yes, we did it.
How are we planning to just expand and grow to improve kind of here? I know we're in a weird holding pattern right now with a lot of weddings and other stuff. But where do you guys want to see you improve and grow, and where do you want to you seem someone that's so bundled with
Yeah.
energy and ideas?
So for us, we're actually wanting to grow more with how we can really help couples, um, have that small wedding experience, but yet in that big experience same way by doing live streams. So really kind of partnering with a lot of local vendors and such that offer that service, and being able to show that you can still have a wedding, you can still have all that fun, but we can make it small. And that's where I want to see growth with that, because I think that will also help a lot of vendors with the whole, oh, but we're on a budget, and I don't think that's going to work. Offering something like that and helping both couples and vendors, where you may be on a budget and you may not be able to have everybody there, but we could still set up something for you and make it small and intimate and really fun and still capture your vision, almost like styled shoot in a way, but yet we can make it into a wedding. So that's something that we're looking to grow. And then also looking to really further out, because we do destination weddings a lot. That's something that I'm really growing more as well. So I'm taking this time to really feel markets throughout. So Mexico's a really big hot spot. Hawaii is another big hot spot. And then, like I said, Disney weddings are also big hot spots. Finding out those markets and seeing how both my husband and I can help couples that are having those type of weddings as well. Especially people from, the Pacific Northwest, especially from Portland, like how can we help them plan those weddings? And things like that, and partnering with other planners in those areas to make sure that everything is good to go when we do those type of weddings. So
Yeah, it's certainly a lot more stress, but it seems, to do those destination ones, but it seems like that's something you guys have, well under control.
yeah, it's one of those things where I like to, that's why I've been kind of pinpointing those hotspot markets where a lot of people get married at and want to go. And then learning what planners are in the area and understanding, what happens there and working with them. So like if a couple books me for a destination wedding, the idea is that if I couldn't go to the destination, that I already have a partner planner there. So that way they can help them. So essentially they're booking both of us, because I will be working with them back and forth. Like, hey, can you get all of the, all the local vendors, let's work together. Our couple's booking both of us for this wedding. So that way we're on the same path and whatnot. So that's kind of, how we want to work out with destination weddings. Is usually you hire a planner where you live or something that specializes in destinations. They take care of everything, but then there's usually not a backup plan of what happens if that planner can't make it. What if they can't make it because they, if I have another baby or something. So being able to understand the other market and meet the other vendors in that market has been very key to making sure that grows and becomes successful.
Perfect. It's been so nice getting to chat with you today. I'm so glad that we could connect and make this happen. And I love meeting new friends down in Portland and continuing our growth of the podcast down there and getting some new voices. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. And anytime, like if you come down, just hit me up. I can show you where to go, what to eat, all the fun stuff and everything. And I keep forwarding the podcast to all my couples and to all my vendor friends. I'm like, hey, you guys got to check out Reed. You got to check out his podcast. I know one of my friends that does balloons. She may be reaching out to you because she's amazing with balloons. And apparently balloons are very big right now for weddings.
That's good. That's good. Well, I certainly appreciate that and any support. If people want to learn more about you and your story and your planning and your services and everything else, where would you have them check out?
I'd have them check out my website. You can visit events by DanielleNichole.com. Check out the website. Everything's kind of linked there. Instagram is also Danielle Nichole PDX, and Nicole spelled with an H. You can also check out my Instagram there. My Instagram, I do fun stuff sometimes. Right now, I'm taking a little break, but on my highlights, we do a lot of fun style shoots, and we have a big one coming up where I'm incorporating a horse. So it's going to be fun.
Well, perfect. Well, thank you again. If you're like Danielle and you're interested in coming on a future episode of the podcast, you can go to www.bestmadevideos.com/podcast guest. And that's a nice, easy questionnaire we have to kind of get you in the system and see if we can work something out. Thank you again so much. I wish you luck in this time, and I hope we can all kind of get back on track here soon. This has been another episode of Get to Know Your Wedding Pro. Check back next week for another wedding planner interview. Thanks so much.